Welcome back to Weatherford Daze. I'm Rachel. This is Jason. We're the Weatherfords, and we are so thrilled that you are here with us for the brand new beginning of a new month, August, and a new topic for the month. This month, I am actually really excited about the topic, and I'm excited about the very first one because this is a flashback to me, to my early teen years, I guess you would say. So what we are talking about this month is going to be pirate movies, which if you were here for the end of last episode, you got to see you throwing out hints left and right. That was fun.
And they're not, you wouldn't just say they're swashbuckling movies, because then you have to put in some Three Musketeers, Adventures of Robin Hood, some of the early stuff. Maybe Prisoner of Zenda. But the thing is, though, it's specifically pirate.
Yes.
And classic pirate stuff. So it wouldn't be everything pirate. But
though, throw this out there. We are going to finish up, since we have a 5th week of the month of August. We're going to end with a special with our daughter, doing her favorite pirate movie, which is a little bit more modern.
She has opportunities to expound on this specific movie series, and she has a lot to say. So
yeah, it'll be fun.
This will be an opportunity for her too.
But this first week, what we're covering is going to be a old, which you probably have the year that it was made.
I think it was it 52?
I was thinking probably
no, 42.
1940 movie called The Black Swan. It's starring Tyrone Powers and Maureen O'Hara.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, this is one that I discovered when I was in my early teens. Looking back on it, I kind of go, my parents were not as strict with movies as I thought they were.
Right.
With some of the content in these. We were pretty sheltered from a lot of the, we didn't do PG-13 or R-rated movies really in our house, but, we did some of the older movies that kind of snuck in those more adult themes. They snuck them, didn't they?
Sneaky.
Yeah, and I think that it just, kind of went over my head a little bit. But, and, watching it again as an adult, it was like, oh, wow, this is a little bit more risque. But they handled risque in a more delicate way back then. So I feel like they got away with introducing more adult-themed contents in a way that was more family-friendly, which I think is, I think that as we're talking about movies, that is something that is kind of a lost art. Where now there's a whole lot, there's this big divide between family movies, family-friendly movies, and the themes that they will even talk about, and adult movies. And the adult movies are very adult. It wasn't this is an adult movie, but it's still presented in such a way that a younger child could watch and not going to be scarred for life. So yeah.
A lot of that, those are some things that me and my son have previously discussed about how some of those rating systems kind of were born. They didn't have rating systems early on. It was actually through the Hays Code, and the Hays Code was actually influenced by the Catholic Church. They actually had Catholic priests who would go, no, not this, yes, that, and it's kind of, you can tell, because they would say, if there's a criminal, that criminal has to be brought to justice at the end, because we don't want these kids getting the wrong idea that they can get away with this stuff.
I love that. I wish we still had that kind of oversight.
Some of it was ridiculous, but as it kind of more solidified, and then now it's getting kind of wonky again.
But it's the thing of, it wasn't just, words or, certain specific things that they can sneak everything else by. They actually went for messaging of the movies.
Yeah.
And that's
story
a big
theming,
deal.
Yeah.
I wish they still did that, but that was a fun bunny trail. Let's get back on track.
Now, you may ask yourself, the Black Swan. Is that the alter ego of the main character? Nay, it is not. If you're thinking, oh well, it's the ship that he sails in. Nay, again, it's the villain's ship, because his ship is called the good guy's ship is called the Revenge. So that is actually one of the things that confused me about the title. Is when we first started watching, I was like, oh, so he's the Black Swan, and then that kind of threw me off, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you would think so with, something like the Scarlet Pimpernel or something along those lines.
Zorro.
Yeah.
Something like that, the Crimson Pirate, Captain Kidd, Blackbeard. Oh, that's them. Right.
Yeah. But this is an interesting plot.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel like it is a little bit different than most other pirate movies of the time. Like, it really did kind of have a unique plot, and I liked it for that. I still do. I think this is one of my favorite pirate movies. Not necessarily because of the moral that it teaches or the lesson, but because just of the history and, the setting that it's placed in is really fun. But I also think that the fun thing about this, as an adult analyzing it, is that it raises a really interesting question that it doesn't necessarily answer. So we're going to get into that. All right, story. We open up where we're in basically just a town. Do we know the very first village that they open up in?
I think it's on the Spanish Main.
Yeah, somewhere on the Spanish Main. We see that there is just a town. We've got a lady standing in a window, somebody singing and strumming a guitar, serenading her. We have a town watchman, night watchman, that is, out there going 12 o'clock and all is well. And then we see that there are these people that are sneaking up and coming over the wall of the village. And so there's this attack, and we find out that, it's pirates that come swarming in, overwhelm everyone in this village. They start carting out goods and carrying out women and just, very quickly overwhelm, and then they go off to enjoy their booty. So while they are enjoying the spoils of their pillaging, we see these two characters, and they're kind of some of the main characters that we're introduced to. We're introduced to two captains, actually. We're introduced to Captain Jamie Waring and Captain Leach. And they're both, they're kind of drunkenly talking together. And it's a very interesting scene because they've got these two girls tied up, laying down in front of them, just kind of randomly, which it's so over the top, and yet I guess as a kid I just accepted, oh yeah, that's perfectly a normal behavior for pirates to do. I guess in the, fantasy and tales, that is a perfectly normal thing for a pirate to do, right?
Right.
It's so, anyway. But yeah, so they're talking together, and we find out that they had a captain that they're upset that he was captured. And while Captain Leach is saying, oh, well, forget him. Anybody that manages to get captured is just not worth our time. Jamie is like, no, we're going to drink to him, because he's just the greatest captain ever. So we see right at the very beginning, this is a major plot point that's going to kind of dominate the entire rest of the plot, is these two men's attitudes about this one Captain Morgan. And next thing we know, the guards or some soldiers from, I don't know where they came from, we don't ever really find out. There's some soldiers that come on them, they've snuck up on the pirates, and they come in, they capture Jamie. Captain Leach gets away, and I very sincerely hope that they rescue those poor women. But we don't see that because apparently the women were just laid out there just as a prop, right?
Right.
That struck me as like, why do we not care about any of these side characters? We have all of these poor women that were captured and in distress, and we don't even see them rescued. But no, the important part is that Captain Jamie gets captured. So the next thing we know, he is being held by this official and being put on the rack and tortured for information. And we find out that the information that he wants is the whereabouts of Captain Morgan, because apparently Captain Morgan has escaped. And Jamie is, while he's not thrilled to be tortured, he is absolutely delighted at the fact that his captain, this man who apparently he admires greatly, has escaped. While he's in the middle of being tortured, his men come and mount a rescue for him. So he very quickly is able to get off, try to take back, he turns the tables, he puts the one who was torturing him on the rack, and okay, so the one who was torturing him was a Spanish.
Yes.
Somebody, lord of some kind, noble officer, some kind.
Because we got the England versus Spain.
Right.
Kind of at each other's throats here.
And then we also have an English nobleman that comes down as Jamie is being rescued, and he's, putting this guy, the Spaniard, on the rack. The Englishman comes down and he's like, no, guys, we're not at war anymore. Spain and England, we've signed a peace deal. So y'all don't need to be doing this, So he's kind of going, you get the idea that these aren't just pirates that are just doing their own thing. They're actually English pirates that are actively working for the crown. So even though they're still, kind of, they're not the soldiers, they're not the gentlemen and the kind of the upper crust, it does sound like, you get the idea that the crown was using these mercenary
privateer
right,
kind of style
to help out in the war efforts.
Right.
And now that they've made peace, they're trying to get a handle on the pirates. So yeah, Jamie doesn't believe the guy at first. He's like, yeah, no, whatever. We're going to keep doing our thing. And until, lo and behold, Captain Morgan shows up. And Captain Morgan is like, no, Jamie, my boy, we're going to, I've actually turned, and the king has actually granted me a full pardon for piracy, and he's going to grant that to all of my captains. He wants us to work together, with him, and we're going to actually, he's like, everyone that lays down and stops their piracy is going to get a full pardon from the king, and they're going to get land in Jamaica. And, they're like, well, who's going to grant the land? Well, me, because, the king has made me the governor of Jamaica. So he's like, Jamie, go get all the other captains that have ever worked for me, get them to come to this place. I'm going to, we're going to do this thing. And Jamie is just like, oh, okay, we're doing this. This is great. So you kind of get the idea that Jamie's loyalty is to Captain Morgan. So pretty much he's got some loyalty to the crown, it sounds like, but he didn't really necessarily believe. There's some jadedness there. So you're kind of seeing the politics and stuff unfolding of what's happening in this time period. And so they gather everybody together. Captain Leech is there, and Captain Leech, before Jamie and Captain Morgan get there, is very much doubting what's happening. He is very strongly believes that that Captain Morgan is being hoodwinked, that they're offering peace and a pardon for all of the pirates, but that, as soon as they lay down their arms, they'll just take them and imprison them or hang them or whatever. That, it's a trick. They're not going to actually pardon them and give them land. But, Captain Morgan comes in kind of in the middle of there's this confrontation and argument. And Captain Morgan is like, assuring them, no, this is legit, this is true, who will join me. And while it seems like most of the captains there will, there's a handful led by Leech that just absolutely refuse. They're like, nope, we're doing our own thing, we're going our own way.
And they're going to go to Maracaibo, which is like either an island or someplace off of Spain, who knows. I did look it up, but it's Maracaibo. There you go. Good enough.
Yeah. So they're going to keep going, and they're going to end up being a problem, but, for Captain Morgan and Jamie, which his first mate calls him Jamie Boy.
His first mate's name is Tom Blue.
Yeah.
He's great. One thing to also talk about is after Jamie gets out, wasn't the Englishman who came down, and he was Lord Denby.
Right.
Lord Denby has a daughter, Lady Margaret Denby or whatever. And that first meeting is, it's a whopper.
Yeah, so she sees him in all of his pirate glory to begin with, and his
culottes and they're pulled up to his past his navel. So those pants they're just to die for.
They're funny. But, he pretty much, the way that he treats her as a woman is rather interesting. It's
a word to use.
Interesting, yeah. She absolutely wants nothing to do with him. She looks down on him and everything that he stands for. Obviously, he's a pirate. And he is, for some reason, in every interaction, his first thing is just to go, the assumption that of course she likes him and,
Gonna give him a smooch.
Yeah, so he's just very, I guess at some point that would be looked on as dashing and debonair, and, sometime, more recently we look at that as toxic masculinity. So, going back to this 1940s movie, it just, looking at it from a modern lens, you're going, this guy won't take no for an answer. He takes and twists every answer that she gives him as oh yeah, you must secretly want me. That's what's going on here. Obviously,
yeah,
I know
even when she bites him on the arm.
Right, he tries to force a kiss from her, and she bites him, and slaps him. Yeah, tells him she loathes him, she despises him, leave her alone. He absolutely won't take no for an answer, and yet this is I guess this is our enemies to lovers romance, right?
It's our hero, ladies and gentlemen.
Right. So this is our leading lady and our leading man, and the way that they meet, and isn't it fabulous? Yeah.
And of course, Lord Denby has land in Jamaica. And guess where his daughter is going to be too? Jamaica. Right. And where is Jamie and all them? Same place.
Well, apparently Lord Danby was the previous governor of Jamaica.
Right.
So when the new governor of Jamaica goes and, gets ready to take over, the house that he and his daughter were in is now going to belong to Captain Morgan and his crew. I guess we call them his support. So his captains that are helping him out.
His political cabinet now.
Right.
So that's a kind of a twist, because you're like, I'm a sword-swinging swashbuckler, and now I'm, a vice mayor or something. It's a little bit of a change up.
So we, proceed on to the governor's taking over, and the people that are there are not too thrilled with what's happening, but Captain Morgan is, he is determined that he's going to do a good job. He is there. He's a man on a mission. He's going to clean up, the piracy in the area. He feels like he is uniquely fit for the job. So that's his mission. He's really, you find out that this is not something that he's just playing at. He really feels strongly and he believes in what he has, the job that the king has given him to do. So you really do, you like Captain Morgan. You can see why Jamie really admires him. And, this is a man that inspires loyalty. And I think, you kind of get the idea that if the people would just give him a chance, that he will win people over.
Right.
He's just a charismatic personality. Yeah, so they go to take over and, announce that this is what they're going to do. They're going to be cleaning up piracy. We also see Jamie and Lady Margaret, who is, every interaction that they have is just not good. She, he kind of follows her around like a puppy dog in some ways, and she just continually scorns him. We find out that she actually has someone a man that she is very much in love with, seems to be. And, she continually, every time that Jamie tries to push her and press her, and, he just is like hands on her, grabbing her, trying to, escort her places. And she's constantly asking him, this other guy, to rescue her and to help her. Is his name Richard?
Roger Ingram.
Roger Ingram. And we find out that Roger Ingram is not just a pretty face and not just there to be the love interest of Margaret, but he actually has a deeper part to play. So the next scene that we have, after he's kind of rescuing her, and we're like, oh, well, she actually has somebody that we're interested in, or that she's interested in, and he seems like he's a really great guy. So there's really no place for Jamie here. Well, then we see Mr. Robert Ingram meeting with none other than Captain Leach. And he is offering to tell all the details of what shipments and, where the gold is going to be, what's being shipped where and when. So he is giving...
Also where any opposition might be too.
Right.
How to avoid them.
Right. So he's telling them the best time and place in return for a captain's share of the profit. Our good guy is not actually a good guy. And it seems like there's also, you kind of wonder if it was just, this is the opportune thing. He just wanted to get rich, or it might actually be that he was motivated by a desire to, he'd just seen this guy come in, Captain Morgan come in and declare that he's going to defeat piracy. And you kind of get the idea that maybe there was just, he didn't want him to actually succeed,
Well, yeah.
But you don't really know whether it was no, I actually just want to undermine this one guy because I don't like him, or whether it was just hey, there's an opportunity here for me to get rich and I'm going to take it.
Plus, his father-in-law got dethroned by this guy.
Well, he's not the father-in-law yet.
No.
But, he's the father of his intended.
He's a suitor.
Right. After he sells the secrets of, where people are going to be, he manages to pull off a huge heist, and, news very quickly gets back that as soon as Captain Morgan takes over, then they lose some of the biggest pile of money that they have done in a long time, which does not look good for Captain Morgan and his claims to be able to clean up. But
doesn't seem to be so anti-pirate. If
right.
They're even saying, no, you're just propping up your buddies here.
Right. Then I mean Ingram is in there in, the meetings with, it almost seemed like a Senate type hearing. They've got this is their legal procedure.
They're like
Parliament.
Parliament in miniature.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he's just like, yeah, well, obviously he's not doing a good job, so, and Morgan is there. No. Okay. So I know who did it and I know where he goes to hang out after he does it. So this is where he's going to be. I'm going to send Jamie and 2 of my other ships, I believe. They're going to go catch him. It'll be great. No worries. Don't worry. It'll all be good. So Jamie and them go on to go catch Leech, and they know exactly where he's going to be, what port. But we find out that Ingram sends a very fast schooner messenger to go warn Leech that they're coming, and right before they get here, Leech leaves. So Jamie and his ships get there to apprehend Leech, and he's gone. But they find out that there was a messenger sent and where it came from. So Jamie turns around, goes back to let Morgan know that had happened. They walk in, and the pressure has been amping up in the meantime. People aren't happy with Captain Morgan. They're going to try and get rid of him at this point. And, Captain Morgan's like, you guys don't have the authority to impeach me. You can't do anything. Just shut up and stop. But, he still isn't feeling, he feels like he's got something to prove. And so, he's going, you just wait. As soon as Jamie comes back, he's going to have news that they've captured him and everything's going to be great. Well, then Jamie comes in and he's like, see, here he is. Tell us, how many ships did you capture? How many prisoners have you brought back? And Jamie's like, none. None and none. And they're all, there's a big uproar, and he's like, no, somebody from here warned him. So, I'm going to go back out and we're going to capture him. We're going to keep searching until we find him. And Ingram is like, oh yeah, where are you going to be? And Jamie's like, I'm not telling anybody here my plans from now on. So Ingram is like, well, tell you what, you say that we can't impeach you, Captain Morgan. I'm going to take articles of impeachment. I'm going to head to England and I'm going to petition the king. And I'm going to do that with my new bride because I'm getting married tomorrow. And lo and behold, he has told Margaret that he's come into a great deal of money and asked her to marry him, and he's going to go and take the articles of impeachment. Plus, he's planning on buying, an estate and, all kinds of stuff. So he's made these plans with Margaret, and, things look like they're going to go pretty good for this guy. But Jamie's conflicted, see, because Margaret has gotten under his skin somehow.
Right.
Which is interesting because she has done nothing this entire time but try to get away from him. She slapped him. She's knocked him out cold because
with a rock.
Yeah. She was trying to get away with him and fell off her horse. And it knocked her out. She wakes up while he's carrying her and is like, put me down. He then proceeds to be like, okay, no, you have to lay down. You can't walk. And he tries to check her ankle, and then he's like, oh, well, maybe I need to check your knees. And yeah, he's being very, very fresh. And so she distracts him by pretending to be interested in him for, a few seconds, which you would think such a drastic change in behavior, a very smart man like him would notice. But that's the age-old distraction technique, right? If you can't get away from somebody, then you pretend to be interested in them until they get distracted enough.
And then brain them with a rock.
Yeah, you can knock them over the head with a rock. a knock him over the head with a rock. There we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so but he can't not think about her. So he tells Captain Morgan, okay, I'm going to go back, but I'm not going to go back until tomorrow. I'm not going to go tonight. And Captain Morgan's like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, I just want to talk to her. I need to have a conversation with her. And Captain Morgan flat out tells him, no, leave her alone. You have a job to do. You have to go tonight. So Jamie, being Jamie, in his little boy brain, thinks, okay, well, I am going to take drastic measures because obviously she can't actually love this guy or something to that effect, even though she has, said repeatedly she has no interest in me. She has to have interest in me because I like her. So he goes to her house and kidnaps her from her garden. Brilliant plan. And takes her onto his ship with him, where he proceeds to come up with the idea, seemingly on the spot, that it's not just for his own selfish, whims that he's done this, but that actually he did it for Captain Morgan too, because this is going to delay Ingram from going with the articles of impeachment because he'll be searching for Margaret. A likely story, right? Anyway, so next thing that happens, we find out that, she is on the ship with Jamie. He's trying to convince her that she really doesn't want to be with Ingram. She really wants to be with him. He's also letting her know that all of the things that have happened with somebody has betrayed them. He says, somebody is going to have come into a lot of money. And she kind of makes a face like, what? And he's like, yeah, no, somebody is getting a share, is feeding information to Lynch and getting a share, of the money. So if you know somebody, and he's like, wait, is it your father? And she's like, no. And he's like, oh, wait, is it your lover boy? And she's like, just won't answer, which is an answer in itself. So, Jamie's figured out who the snitch is. So, next thing that happens, Jamie gets called out and they see that they are just one ship by themselves. They're joining their other ships that are currently in Maracaibo, but Jamie's ship, the Revenge, is all by itself. Well, they just happen to have stumbled upon Lynch and another ship. So they're outgunned currently. And they realize, there's no outrunning the Lynch's ship, which is the Black Swan. So they're kind of stuck. Leech. Thank you. There's no outrunning Leech's ship, which is the Black Swan.
Right. So
Jamie comes up on the spot with the only plan that he can come up with, because he's like, we can't outrun them. Leech knows that I'm the enemy at this point. He's not going to let me go. My only hope is to convince him that I've joined, or that I've actually been searching for him in order to join him.
Yeah.
So Leech, he invites Leech on board. They, lay down all arms. They're like, hey, welcome. Yeah, we were trying to find you. And Leech is like, oh, really now? Well, if you were trying to find me, why didn't you come straight here? Why did you go back to Jamaica? Your story has a hole in it. And Jamie's like, oh, well, I had to go get my bride. I, fell in love. See? And he brings out Margaret, who at this point thinks, oh, well, yeah, Jamie is he's returned to his piracy. and he's betrayed everything. He's proven that he is who I thought he was. He's a scoundrel at heart. And so Leech buys it, and, at least with a little bit of hesitation, he's kind of not really sure whether Jamie is fully committed to him or not. But the story makes enough sense that he's like, okay, sure, great, one more on our side. This is what we need. They are heading towards where Jamie's other ships are. And, that's Jamie's plan. So, but Leech wants Jamie and his bride, Margaret, to come aboard the Black Swan. And that's kind of his way of ensuring that, nothing is going to happen here. He's kind of got them as hostages, I guess. Only, they're being treated as guests. So after Jamie signs the agreement of how they're going to, split things up, how things are going to go, Jamie goes back to the room with Margaret, because they're supposed to be a newlywed couple. And he is telling her what, has happened. And they end up, there's a couple of different interactions there. Jamie is, he's like, okay, look, things are serious now. Yeah, I was flirting with you and whatever before, but fine. If you want nothing to do with me, great. I'll leave you alone. And he actually realizes at this point, like, I pulled her into something I didn't mean to. And you can see that, he regrets this, but he's going to just try and get through the best that he can. But he also is trying to convince her that he is really, he's not double-crossing Robert Morgan. He is actively working to try and double-cross Leech. So while he's trying to convince her, and, he's actually being very respectful towards her as much as he can when nobody else is around, he goes to tell her, no, okay, so this is what's actually happening. Leech thinks that he's going and we're going to, do this, but I've actually got men waiting there. And Leech overhears him telling her this. So then he grabs Margaret, Leech does, and ties up Jamie. And, now he knows what to expect, that that they're waiting for him there. So he decides to, instead of having the pirate flag up, that he's going to run up the British flag, the King's flag. So he goes in to port, and he's going kind of full steam. And everybody's there, they think, because he leaves the Black Swan and the other ship behind, and he's in Jamie's ship, the Revenge. So Morgan, Captain Morgan, in the meantime, has, after Jamie kidnapped the old governor's daughter, Margaret, he's gotten in even more trouble. And they basically, the entire island came up in arms and kicked him out and were like, nope. So he's lost his position, and he is mad at Jamie. So he has come after them, and he's going to, he's determined, okay, no, Jamie's double-crossed me. This is all Jamie's fault. I'm going to capture Jamie and take him back. And I'm also going to, I've got to fix this whole situation. He's like, I've lost my governor position, but I'm going to make it right. But the way that he wants to make it right is capturing Jamie. So Jamie's in a tight spot at this point. He has been captured by Leech. Morgan doesn't know what has happened. And it's just, it's kind of a mess. But we're now at we're at the climax of it. So the Revenge, the pirate ship Revenge, captained by Leech, is now coming in. We've got Morgan, who's waiting there, who thinks that this is Jamie coming because the King's flag is still raised. And so all of a sudden they're coming in. They're like, what is he doing? He's driving that ship really, really weird. What's going on? He's like, well, it's almost like he's about to blast us. which, lo and behold, that's what Leech does. He comes in, swings around, and just starts firing at the ships that are there. And you've got this massive sea battle taking place in which Margaret has been put in her and tied up. Jaime's men have all been tied up. Jaime's tied up in a different ship. Jaime, though, manages to get free. He dives into the water. He cuts the steering on one of the ships. He sneaks onto the other ship after the second ship has been disabled and, driven aground. He sneaks onto the other ship, manages to get his men free. So there's fighting and everything going on. In the meantime, Captain Morgan has boarded the ship too, and everything is just crazy. But while Captain Morgan is subduing all of the other men, Jaime has gone down, and he and Leech are in a one-on-one battle in which Jaime ends up getting stabbed, but then he stabs Leech. And yeah, the second stab was mightier than the first one. So Leech is actually dead. Jaime is just wounded. But the wounds happened right in front of Margaret, who has actually come to, by this point, believe that the one who has actually betrayed them all is who she thought she was in love with, and that the one who has rescued her and is actually the good guy is Jaime. And somehow, in all of the craziness that's happened, she's actually managed to connect the dots and put all of this together and actually believes Jaime, which is rather miraculous that has actually happened. But it has. He's convinced her. And yet, gotten wounded in the meantime. And Margaret has done nothing but stand there and be a lady in distress, which if we were in a new movie, just as an aside, if we were in a newer movie, she would have gotten free and been the one to actually brain Captain Leech over the head and been the one to rescue herself. She would. That's the way that they would have done it now. But, since this was an old movie, she just remained tied up and was the absolutely amazing lady in distress. So, but, then Jaime's been injured, but then Captain Morgan comes in. And, Captain Morgan still thinks that Jaime is just the worst at this point. So he comes in, he's like, is he dead? No, great, that's wonderful, because I didn't want him to rob me of the pleasure of killing him myself. So, Captain Morgan's like, that's it. He's done for. Jaime's bad. And, he's like, because, his worst crime, he kidnapped this poor woman right here. And he's like, young lady, I'm so sorry that, for what my man has done to you, I promise justice will be done. I apologize greatly that he's, traumatized you so much. And she's like, what are you talking about? I came of my own free will.
That's true.
Dun, dun, dun. So she has apparently decided, nope, I'm going to keep Jaime out of trouble, and, everything will be well. So our final scene, which, oh man, I don't think I mentioned, that when he told her, fine, I'll leave you alone earlier, he said, but one day, unless you ask me, you have to say Jaime boy 3 times and ask me to touch you again before I touch you. And so he just basically said, nope, I'm done. So he set the terms for that. Well, they're ending scene. They're going back, and Captain Morgan is kind of reminiscing and saying, oh, the beautiful, the open sea. It wouldn't take very much to convince me to just stay here and leave all of the governing and politics behind.
He misses it.
Yeah, he misses it. And then, Jaime comes out and he's recovering, and the Captain Morgan and Tommy Blue are watching, and you see Margaret come out, and she's she's in sailor garb, and she's following Jamie out, and she's like, Jamie boy, what are you doing out here? And then she's like, oh, Jamie boy. And he's kind of looking at her like, okay, what's going on? He's like, no, I said 3 times you have to say it. And so she then goes, oh, Jamie boy. And then they kiss. And it's like, okay, so she's actually asked him. And yeah, that's the end. It is the kiss. So they're now together. And my little, 13-year-old heart, when I first watched this movie, thought that was the most romantic, amazing thing ever, was that she had actually fallen in love with him after he had told her that he wouldn't pursue her anymore.
What's with the ladies always wanting these toxic dudes? Not toxic enough. They're not, they don't like it, but the opposite is boring. So you want something interesting, and then you get something toxic, and then you don't like it, and then you want something normal, and so.
Isn't it funny though? I guess to me it's just I'm going, my 13-year-old self thinking that was the most romantic thing ever. I really think there is just something in women that, we don't have to be taught that the very strong masculine character is romantic. I think that's just a very human nature thing. As we look at this very dominant alpha male, and yet when you balance that out with, him learning to respect her and seeing that character arc, at the beginning, the way that he was treating her, nobody wants that. But by the end, when we've all learned that he actually is very true, that you see the loyalty that he has for his captain, you see that he is honest, and you contrast that with this other character that seemed very suave and genteel, and then he turns out to be this disloyal, selfish person that's actually betraying his own people, whereas it's like Jamie ends up actually being the honest one. And that's, to me, I went, this is the theme of this movie. And it's actually something that creates a quandary for women. And it comes up time and time again, especially when you have this sort of thing, where you have this person that starts out being very toxic, or somebody that you think is just not very nice, and then they end up actually being, it's the misunderstood male character. It's the enemies to lovers trope, right? But the question is how do you tell if a man is good or not?
To me, what is attractive about this kind of character? And you'll see this tons of times, not only in real life, but in fiction, is you got the rebel character. He is indomitable. Can't tell him what to do. And generally it's against authority figures. So he flounces authority, right? But what the woman or female character wants is, I want him to flounce authority, and I want him to stand up for himself and be indomitable. But when it comes to me, he'll give me the things that I need. But you don't understand that when you go whole into that persona of, I don't care what anybody else thinks, I'm out for myself, and da-da-da, and you're like, oh, that's such a strong character trait. But the thing is, though, they don't, he doesn't do what I want him to do. No doy. I mean,
If you look at it, though, that's not the way this movie went.
No, it's not.
Because it's way more complex considering the politics of the time. Whereas, you think that a pirate is actually just out for themselves. Well, in this case...
And you get Leech representing that.
Right. You had some of the pirates that were out for themselves, but then you actually find out that some of them, Jamie especially, he was doing this for England. And he very much had a side. And, he had a purpose to what he was doing. It wasn't just, I'm going out there. And, you see, yeah, he definitely, he was drinking, he was womanizing, he was treating people like property and things. And, you have that whole element of the piracy thing. But it was also, he had, I guess, the thieves' honor type thing.
Yeah.
And I think that if you read or watch a lot of fiction, that's something that comes up a lot, is that idea of the thieves' honor. It's like, yes, you're a scoundrel, but you're a scoundrel with morals. And that's the thing that kind of creates the opportunity to have a romance come in there. Because you're never ever going to have somebody that just falls in love with somebody that doesn't have any moral compass. There's always, that actual finding out that even though it's the misunderstanding, and when you understand what the purpose was and what the idea was for why this person is acting in this way, then it's like, actually going, oh, well, they're actually admirable. There's an honor there.
But also he served England because he didn't want to hang from the gallows. He didn't want to be on a gibbet. So to some it would look like you're just saving your hide and that you're a backstabber. But that's not exactly what he was doing. He was kind of going, well, why am I doing this? Well, if I can get this, what I want to get out of this from not having to do piracy, then that's fine. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't for him, for Jamie, it wasn't the thrill of being a pirate, although it was a thrill, but he was like, I'll do it, I'll do it for king and country. It's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. What's one or the other? It doesn't matter to him. But Leach was just like, looking at him as if he was a traitor. Mm-hmm. So.
And then, you kind of get with Ingram the idea of, this is somebody that you have this contrast of like, Jamie was more lowborn, right? He seemed like he was somebody that just was always poor. And this was the lifestyle that he was accustomed to, that you survive and you act in a certain way. And you have that contrasted with this highborn, more wealthy person who just is going to look down on the behavior of the other. Mm-hmm. But when you get to the heart and the motivations of each man, the motivations of Jamie versus the motivations of Ingram, were vastly different. You have selfishness versus unselfishness. You have disloyalty on the one hand, contrasted with loyalty. And even though we might not think that Jamie's loyalty was in the correct place at first, but the fact that he was loyal more to Morgan, but there was also a loyalty to his country. So with all that, you go, how obviously we think that we know that Jamie's good and Ingram's bad, right? Mm-hmm. That's the conclusion that the movie wants you to come to. But I don't know. I really just kind of sit there and I wonder, can we actually go there? Because to me, there's something more that you need, right? You need time for somebody to prove themselves. It seemed like the most unrealistic thing to me is when somebody jumps so quickly from loving one person to loving another person. And I think that I would have liked the movie a lot more if they'd given that time element.
I saw a lot of, oh, Roger. I didn't see a lot of passion. Now, of course, with Jamie, the passions you saw were frustration and then later love, or whatever you want to call that. But with Roger, it was just kind of like, well, okay, it seemed like a formality kind of thing, like, okay.
But
there wasn't any oomph to it.
I watch a movie like this, especially with my girls. I've got teenage girls, you know? I'm sitting here analyzing and going, was that in any way realistic for how a woman should act? And the answer is gonna be no.
Right.
Because flip-flopping from somebody who you thought that you loved and that you thought that you knew who they were, finding out that they weren't who you actually thought they were, and immediately falling in love with someone else that you hated 3 seconds ago. And then, you realized, oh, wow, he's actually brave and, strong. And, obviously he's handsome, but the other dude was handsome too, right? But going, oh, well, this guy has proven that he is better because he had to go through this horrific situation where everybody thought that he was betraying them, but turns out that he was actually on the right side. But, and then going, oh, well, obviously I must love this guy.
Well, the movie wants us to kind of like, of course, because he's the guy on the marquee. They want us to like Tyrone Powers. They want us to like him as his character, and he's likable. Except for those moments when he's not, he makes those. But you see that less and less as the story goes. So, you start to see that he respects her a little bit, even though he's a little bit like, he's not having any of her nonsense. Like, he's also not being the source of the ire, he doesn't think. So, he's making some better choices. And yes, Ingram looks like the worst guy. Morgan doesn't look so bad, even though he's coming after Jamie. So it's just, you keep coming back to Leach being the bad guy.
Well, Leach and Ingram were both bad, obviously.
Yeah.
But Jamie had his bad moments too.
Yeah.
What he has done, you can't overlook all of the bad. But at the same time, do I think that he is redeemable from the character traits that we see? Yeah, I do. I'm not saying, she was absolutely mistaken to fall in love with him. I'm saying what she didn't do was give it time to actually establish, is who she thinks he is true? And I think that, in my kind of ruminating, it's like, how do you tell if someone's good or not, right? What I kind of went is, it's not whether or not they've ever made a mistake. We can forgive mistakes. We can forgive some pretty bad mistakes if somebody has shown that they've changed and that they've grown and that they've learned. But what you can't replace is something that, I went to the Bible verse, and it's in Titus, and it says, what does the Lord require of you but to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God? Because ultimately, you can't simply trust somebody, because, what my brain first went to was, as a Christian, was like, oh, well, they have to be a Christian, right? They have to know God. And then it was like, well, but no, because the thing is that there's a lot of men who know about God that it's been proven that that's been, in name only. They're just using that to sometimes they twist, they manipulate the Word of God to benefit themselves. But, what you can't replace is seeing somebody do those things, to act justly, to love mercy. Some versions say love goodness, and to walk humbly with God. That walking is something that takes time, that happens, it's a progression, right? And that's something that you can't replace. You have to see somebody walk with God while you're walking with God. And I think that to me seemed like it was the key. What do you think?
I think that he does have a redemption arc, and you do see that. He is the rebel. He doesn't start out as a lovable rogue. He's just a rogue. and those elements come in as he kind of evolves. But I think that the core of who he is and how he handles situations was always there. It's just that how it kind of, worked itself out, and how he treated other people that were not combatants, and that kind of thing.
I think there was an element of she had to teach him how a lady should be treated.
Yes.
I don't think that he, knew necessarily.
Well, let's put it this way. He did not treat, Leach, I think, was shown as treating people worse. But yeah, he had to learn that. But he was always true to, there was always that element of honor within him. He was rough around the edges. It was the edges that were rough, but
and
the core was not rough.
He definitely pushed harder than he should have, but he wasn't somebody that was just going to take and violate her.
Right.
He wanted to make her fall in love with him. He just didn't know how to do that.
Right.
So, yeah, there's an element. It's kind of one of those where it's like, what is forgivable and what isn't forgivable in that. And, we see that obviously she was able to forgive, and was able to teach him. She's portrayed as somebody very strong. She doesn't just turn over and go passive and compliant. She's, portrayed as somebody that's going to stand up for herself throughout this entire thing, which I think is a good thing. It needed to be in that story.
I do think she makes that switch relatively quickly toward the end.
Yeah.
But we don't know how much time passed aboard the ship and all this kind of thing. It could have been weeks. You never know. But just it made it seem very. These movies move at the speed of movie, which is however fast they want it to move, and so that's why we're thinking, oh, she made a real quick changeover, but it could have taken a little while. We don't know.
Yeah.
They have their foot on the gas.
But I think, in answer to that, I just don't think there's a better summary of, there are elements of things that, if somebody is growing and changing, if there's an element of they didn't know and now they know, and they actually take the time to change and they don't dwell in that, like, there's a lot that can be forgiven in a person. When you have a relationship, you don't necessarily have to go into it with the other person being perfect. And I think that is an important thing, in today's world. I think a lot of people, when they start dating, they go, I want this person, man or woman, to function exactly the way that what my expectations are. And there tends to be an unrealistic expectation there. And, while I wouldn't say, oh yeah, just, be willing to accept a person who has all of these toxic traits and treats you really badly, there's an element of, if you communicate and they rise, and they change, then, I think that there's an okay there to go, yeah, okay, so they change. But you need to give it time, because that needs to be something that's actually changed in them, and not just something that's done momentarily to appease and then they revert back because they're not, they didn't actually take it to heart. So
right.
I think that the walking out, and then just having those aspects of, is this a person who knows justice, who is humble, who loves mercy and goodness? You've got those elements that are at the heart of knowing Christ and knowing his commandments and what he commands of us, but then walking it out, that make up, this is how you know. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up there for tonight. We're gonna continue talking about elements of piracy in different ways as we explore different movies over the next month. So we hope that you will join us back for that. And if you have made it this far, we're going to go ahead and just throw out, we weren't sure that we would be able to record tonight because we are having our son, who has severe autism and anxiety, is having a rough time right now. So you might be able to hear he has not stayed in his bed tonight resting calmly. He's been pacing. We've had our daughter up there watching over him, and we've had several interruptions while we've been trying to record. But we would appreciate, number one, we appreciate you sticking with us. We know this has probably not been the most together and cohesive episode we've ever done, but we've enjoyed the attempt at bringing an episode today. And we would appreciate prayers for him and for us, that we're able to rest and that he's able to get some relief from anxiety. It's just been a struggle for him for many years now. So, but with that, we're going to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us.